Hi, everyone. We're going to get started in just a minute. I want to make sure that all of our guests and attendees are in the right kind of room on Zoom. I see some folks that are not yet panelists, so we want to make sure that all of our potential nominees are in. So give me 1 minute, and I'm going to try to move some folks over to be in the main room, and then we'll get right started. Okay, I think we've gotten everyone in now. And let me just send a quick note to my colleagues to make sure that people know that we are getting started. Okay, so we'll dive in, and sent a notice over. So I know some of my colleagues had sent a message that they'll be joining a little bit later, but I want to respect everyone's time here and dive right in. We are here to discuss the nominees for the Zoning Board of Appeals. This is a committee meeting of the Planning, Development, and Transportation Committee at the Boston City Council. My name is Michelle Wu, and I chair this committee. I want to remind everyone that this is a public meeting that is being recorded and broadcast, and I want to recognize the city councilors that are also here so far. Of course, the ever punctual City Councilor Ed Flynn, and then we're joined by members of the administration and our ZBA nominees. So, okay, oops, a few colleagues also now joining. I'm going to move into our main room. Councilor Mejia, welcome. And a note from a couple others that they'll be right on as well. Okay, so what I would like to hand it to my colleagues to give any opening statements or tell us what's on your mind, and then we'll turn it over to Commissioner Irish to introduce the nominees and then have a little back and forth with each person. Councilor Ed Flynn.
Thank you, Council Wu. I have no opening statement. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Mejia.
Oh, sorry. Usually Ed Flynn has like a whole script and like 3 pages worth of things to say. Now all of a sudden when I'm not ready, you don't have nothing to say, Flynn. Let me get myself ready here. Okay. Thank you, Councilor. Oh, my glasses. Hold up. Flynn, why are you messing me all up? Okay. Thank you, Councilor Wu, for holding this public hearing. As I mentioned the last time, I want to remind, oh, forget this. Give me a minute because my glasses are dirty. Hold on.
You take your time.
Jesus. Thank you, Councilor Wu, for holding this public hearing. As I mentioned the last time, but I mentioned this the last time, but I want to remind everyone again that every decision and every appointment that we make directly impacts the people on the streets. Boston has the 3rd worst gentrification in the country. So let that sink in, the 3rd worst. And many people in our network have been moving out to Brockton and Lawrence because affordable properties are just too hard to come by. And we need to be incredibly careful in who we choose for our zoning board because their decisions are going to impact the daily lives of the people in our city. These appointments are another important step to making planning and development conversation more inclusive and equitable for everyone. And I think, as you all know, I always say that nothing about us without us is for us. And oftentimes we don't see ourselves reflected in these spaces. So this is really an opportunity for us to have the right conversation so we can get things right. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Councilor Mejia. And again, I'm going to, oops, I think someone is in the room. Okay. I'm going to ask when other colleagues join, we'll take a pause and they can jump in and offer their thoughts as well. But right now, if we can shift over to Commissioner Irish and Chris English, if I'm not sure who's on tap to kind of frame this and introduce the nominees, but we'll hand it over to you. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the council. Thank you for being here. Actually, I'm here today to support and just to be available to answer any functional questions that come up regarding the ZBA. We obviously have 4 very great new candidates and 1 reappointment who's also a great candidate for the board. And I thank them for their willingness to serve, and we're here to answer any questions to support their nominations.
Commissioner, thank you so much. And I know there's a lot on your plate with the COVID pandemic and meetings being canceled, and now a lot of folks trying to reapproach and get business going again. So I appreciate your time always, and your feedback and your insights. Do you think you could just tell us a little bit about which particular seats these nominees represent and just some of that brief background, and then we'll dive right in to the nominees.
Okay, so we have Kerry Walsh Logue, who's currently a holdover, and she is a nomination from the Building and Trades Association. We also have Eric Robinson, who would be appointed as a full member, and he's a nominee from the Boston Society of Architects. We have Konstantinos Ligres, who is a nominee to be a full member put forward by the Greater Boston Real Estate Board. We have Jean Panado, who would be an alternate and for the mayors, and she's an appointment put forward by Mayor Walsh as an at-large alternate. And lastly, we have Hansi Better Baraza, who is put forward by the Boston Society of Architects as an alternate.
Thank you. And Councillor Kenzie Bach has now joined us. Councillor Bach, would you like to offer any thoughts before we move to the nominees?
No, just really grateful to the nominees for being here with us on short notice. And I know we're all interested in, trying to add more of a full complement to the board, as soon as possible, in line with the important policy priorities we've been talking about on the council side and with the administration. So grateful to you, Madam Chair, and grateful to all the nominees for being here, and to, of course, Commissioner Irish as well.
Great. Thank you very much. So I think we will, let's see, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 nominees before us. I'd like to just hear an opening statement from everyone. If you could just tell us, very, very briefly, obviously introduce yourself, what part of the city you live in, what your background is, and why you would like to be on the Zoning Board of Appeal, sort of what you would bring to this role. And then we can get into Q&A with individual people one by one. I know 2 folks have alerted my team that they have a time constraint, so we're going to do our best to match that. So let's start first with Hansi Better Barasa. If you could just give a brief introduction.
Thank you, Commissioner Irish. Thank you, Councillor Mejia, for that wonderful introduction on what you're looking for in terms of our role and our service. Thank you, Councillor Bulk. Just to give you a little bit of background on myself, I feel that I can have an impactful contribution to the ZBA. My background is particularly in architecture and planning practice that focuses on urban ecology and social justice interventions in the built environment. I believe strongly that architecture should reflect a progressive role in creating resilient communities. I believe in adaptive and participatory approaches in the field of architecture. And planning should enable cities and citizens towards a more just, green, racially harmonious urban environment. I'm a Latinx architect, originally born in Barranquilla, Colombia. I immigrated at the age of 6. I'm a founder of Studio Luz. I'm one of the few, maybe 2 in the city of Boston that is a Latin-owned, woman-owned firm. Social justice, diversity, equity is central to my practice and ethos. Climate justice and action are critical factors in correcting some of the wrongs in the built environment. Access to clean air, food, housing, and water are essential human rights, and it is my deep belief that it should be reflected in how we build and live in our urban environment. I have a training in architecture from Cornell University and from Harvard Graduate School of Design. I have served the city of Boston in past roles as a designer selection board member for DCAM. I served for 2 years in 2011 to 2013. I've taken ethics exam. I am very honest and humble, and I always look through community perspective, and it probably has to do more with me being an immigrant and understanding what the needs are of the disenfranchised population. City of Boston is a majority Black and Latin Asian population, and I feel strongly that the boards, political boards, should reflect that community. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I'm so excited. Very, very grateful that you're willing to put yourself forward for this position, and just so grateful that the process that the Boston Society of Architects went through on a very short time frame, along with the council, has resulted in such incredible talent and service, being willing to undertake this. So thank you very much. We'll move next to Costa Ligris.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Great. Thank you, Madam Chair, and to the councilors, both for your service to our great city and for being here today. My name is Costa Ligris. I am the byproduct of 2 immigrant parents that immigrated here from Greece in the 1970s. I was born in Jamaica Plain, and I live in South Boston, in the Broadway Village area of South Boston now, where I've resided in South Boston, in the 4 Point Channel area, the last 20 years, actually since I moved out of home, which was not easy for a Greek immigrant family. But nevertheless, I made it out, and made my way to the South Boston 4 Point area. As I mentioned, born and raised in Boston. This is a city that is near and dear to my heart. I went to law school here in Boston. I went to business school here in Boston. I'm a scientist. I studied physiology and chemistry at Boston University, and ended up in a legal career that lasted almost 2 decades before I moved into building technology for consumer lending, focusing on transparency and consumer lending transactions. In terms of some of my background, aside from obviously practicing law in the real estate space, specifically transactional real estate, representing buyers and sellers of residential and commercial real estate assets, as well as something to the tune of approximately 90 or so banks and credit unions, primarily in the Northeast, in mortgage transactions. I serve as an entrepreneur in residence at MIT, which is where I went to business school. One of the things I'm passionate about is obviously innovation, entrepreneurship, as well as entrepreneurship, and have spent a great deal of time actually really studying and doubling down on system dynamics. As a scientist, I believe that every action has an equal and opposite reaction. When you remove liquid from a container, it just displaced with gas. The purpose behind sort of my, sorry for being a little bit geeky, but my sort of scientific, analogy there is, when people sort of ask, well, why are you interested in serving in this capacity? Frankly, I feel it's a duty for citizens of communities to serve their communities. And as such, I want to be able to look back and take a look at some of the progress that we make in our urban development landscape, and be proud that we've been able to bring a diverse set of opinions and experiences, and something that my children and my nephews and hopefully my grandchildren one day would be able to step back and be proud of in terms of what we've been able to do. So with respect to sort of my scientific comment, every time something happens in a community or neighborhood, impact is created. You can't actually create something without creating impact of some type. And impact can be positive, impact can be negative. And I say that because when I build technology, at the forefront of everything I do, I talk about responsible innovation. And so when we talk about real estate, something I'm passionate about is responsible development. And system dynamics, which is something I'm very passionate about, is really studying sort of feedback loops and what are negative and positive feedback loops, reinforcing feedback loops, and how that affects the shape of our communities and what we do. The fact that the Greater Boston Real Estate Board and I spoke about this opportunity really sort of, I believe, resonates in that everything that I stand for is about transparency. Everything that I stand for is about doing the right things, even when the right things are hard to do. And as such, I believe that the Greater Boston Real Estate Board is very passionate about making sure that the public's trust and confidence is not just restored, but validated through the growth and development of a diverse group of people that are passionate about our city. So in terms of my background, as I mentioned, I'm a CEO of a technology startup based in Boston. I'm an EIR at MIT, and I help early stage founders in ag tech, healthcare tech, and all sorts of other really interesting and fascinating technology. I've served as a hearing officer for the Board of Bar Overseers. I'm admitted to practice law in 4 specific jurisdictions. And I'm a current trustee of Suffolk University, also obviously based in Boston, and a proud alumni of the law school there. So thank you for your time and your consideration.
Thank you very much, Kosta. Thank you.
Council.
We're very, very grateful to you too. We will move. I want to acknowledge that Councilors Ricardo Arroyo and Liz Braden have also joined us. Oh, and let me just check. Oh, and Councilor Frank Baker is with us as well. As soon as I move him out. Okay, perfect. Councilor Frank Baker has joined us as well. Okay, and next up will be Jean Pinato.
Thank you, and good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the City Council, Commissioner Irish. It's really a pleasure to be nominated for this position. It's really an important public body for the City of Boston. For the past 22 years, I've been worked for Madison Park Development Corporation. I joined as its Chief Executive Officer back in 1998. I'm really proud of the transformative impact we've had on the lives of over 3,000 Roxbury residents who live in our affordable housing and really quality developments throughout the neighborhood, and some of the commercial buildings that we've developed in Nubian Square. But more than having an impact on the built environment and on the lives and homes of people, we've really taken a holistic approach to community development and engaged in youth programs, health and wellness initiatives, civic engagement, public safety. We're part of the neighborhood trauma team, responding to incidents of violence throughout the neighborhood, and arts and culture, which really is an important part of a community's history and part of our economic development. And through our Hibernian Hall, we've been able to do that, just that, highlight the arts and culture and bring civic activity and nightlife to Nubian Square. I'm familiar with the ZBA. I've been in front of it many times. Over a dozen projects over the 20 some odd years have had to go for variances of various types. I think it's an important body. I'm glad that the mayor has proposed a very diverse group of participants to the ZBA. And I think I bring a unique perspective, having both developed property in the city of Boston, been a Boston resident, raised a family, and also worked on many social justice issues in the community. I think people know me by reputation. I'm a straight shooter, a quiet leader, but really passionate about the impact that we can all have on the city. And so I really look forward to having the opportunity to serve.
Thank you very much. Next up, is it Eric Robinson?
Yes.
Okay, sorry, your Zoom name is the name of the firm, so I wanted
Oh,
to
I'm
make sure.
sorry.
No, welcome, Eric. You're next.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Commissioners. Really appreciate the opportunity to be here. I just wanted to highlight, I think, 3 things that are critical to me as I look into this opportunity. First and foremost, I'm a 20-year resident of Dorchester. I moved there in 2000, and I've raised my family there. I have a senior at BC High and a rising 7th grader at Boston Latin School. And, you know, really the community of Dorchester is something that's really an amazing thing that I've got to experience over time and seen it change over the years. And I'm happy to feel some ownership of the positive change that has come through the community. And so when I was starting my firm in about 15 years ago, it really was born out of the community process. So I lived in Dorchester. I participated in my civic and planning committee, very avid and committed to that process. And what I realized over the first 5 years was the quality of the process with the community was less than admirable. The projects were less than beneficial to the community, and the designs were not enhancing the quality of our lives. So it really was the impetus that started my firm, which I'm the co-owner of with my business partner, Kevin Diebler, who's also a Dorchester resident, was really the goal was to create a firm that really honored this process. And so we started working in our own neighborhood. And you know, obviously some of it was selfish because we wanted to better our own community and our community streets. But as we started to go down the road, we didn't have any work or any opportunities. So we started reaching out to nonprofits and neighborhood groups to see if we can find some work. And the reality of it is that was what served as the basis of our firm. And as we began to grow and learn the community process better, we started to understand really what was critical to the process of building and designing and approving projects in our communities, in our neighborhoods. And the process was not working as far as we could see. We would be at a lot of community events and different meetings with the groups, and we couldn't understand why they were so negative and so non-productive for the communities as well as the quality of the projects moving forward. So our first experience actually with the ZBA was in 2010, where we brought our first major project to the board, and it was actually denied at the board. This was a seminal moment for both myself and our firm. And we really had to reflect on what happened and what that process looked like. And it really gave us the opportunity to even refine and work harder on our community process and understanding the goals of the community as they relate to the goals of our clients, ensuring that those are in alignment, and they can be in alignment in projects in our city. And now that the firm has grown and matured, and we're currently working in every basically neighborhood in the community on all different and in the city and all different sizes of projects, it's been an exciting opportunity for us to see how architects and leaders in this process can really manage and lead a neighborhood process that can be successful. And that's led to some pretty amazing opportunities for us as a firm. And so we are working with outfits in institutions like Pine Street Inn now on their project in JP, where we're going to be bringing 140 units for supportive housing units to their community at large. We're working with many different nonprofits on helping them through their process of either new projects, assessing their own projects and working with it. So the practice started out really as a community-based practice that has now evolved into doing work all over the city, but we believe our process is different. And I think these are really important attributes to help form somebody on the Zoning Board of Appeals. We have been to the Zoning Board of Appeals many times. I think at last count about 50 times. And what we have learned is that the process going up to that point at the Zoning Board of Appeals is critical for the success of the projects. And that process will take very different forms as you move through based on whatever the dynamics of the specific processes are. And so, you know, when this opportunity came to me through the Boston Society of Architects, it really took me quite a bit of time to think and assess how can I be beneficial to the city through the experiences that I've had and the understanding that I've had. And I think what I've understood is that the process can be better. And we as designers and leaders in the city need to lead on that opportunity. And I think through the Zoning Board of Appeals seat, I can help form and make decisions that ensure there's been a transparent and a community-based process that also encompasses design excellence in the work and the projects we are seeing in the communities. We want the projects of our city to be embraced by the communities that they are going into. Not everybody's going to love every aspect of it, and that's understood. But as long as the dialogue is open and transparent through that process, that is something that we have learned that is important and critical to the success of all projects that move through. Whether it myself went through the Zoning Board of Appeals process to add a dormer on my house 15 years ago, or if it's a large scale urban planning project, which we've taken through the process as well. And so it doesn't really matter on the size of the project, but we believe in the right steps of the project need to be adhered to and transparent to ensure the process is clear and understood. I also just wanted to touch base quickly on my belief in that the board needs a very strong architect to be represented. The process of going through the Zoning Board of Appeals is actually quite technical in nature. There are nuances in every neighborhood and every site in this city. And so really having a strong understanding of the underlying zoning, as well as the complexities of how a project goes through its process, really comes to a head at the Zoning Board of Appeals. Many of these projects have been underway for years, and many of them have had false starts where the process is not clear and understanding. And I think being able to really look at every project on its own merits is critical to the success. And also, I think, to the respect of the board. I think we need to be able to listen to the positive and listen to the negative of a project, but ultimately assess each project on its own standing merits to ensure that it can be a betterment to the community that we're building in or designing in. And so, you know, I think that the board does represent something that's so critical to the forward movement of the city. Now, certainly understand there are changes that need to happen. I believe in those changes, and I think they are absolutely critical. And I love to hear the experience of the members that are being nominated to this board, because I do believe that those are attributes that have not been part of the process that I've been on the other side of the table, but understanding the urban qualities and the development planning qualities, super critical. Sustainability in our city is obviously a major hurdle, and to understand the impact of the projects on that as well. We do that at our firm, and I'm experienced in those as an architect. And so I will bring those attributes to the board as well. However, focusing in as being the architect on the board is extremely critical. And therefore, I think that the decisions of the board really should be made. It can make our city stronger, but not tear it apart, as we see a lot of these controversial projects that are going forward maybe that they shouldn't have. And so therefore, I think every project needs to be reviewed. Thank you for the consideration.
Thank you very much. And last but only because she's a reappointment and returning champion, Ms. Carrie Walsh-Logue, if you could just give us a quick reintroduction.
Yes, I will. So again, my name is Carrie Logue. I've been sitting on the ZBA as an alternate member since 2014. So I grew up south of the city, but I've been living in South Boston for the past 15 years or so. Long family history in construction on both sides of the family. So that's how I got into this industry, and, you know, eventually to the zoning board. So for the last 13 years or so, I've been working as an owner's project manager. So we manage a lot of ground up higher education projects, lab and office spaces. In my earlier years, I managed public school construction projects for the K through 12 ages. My interest in the board, you know, beyond just enjoying having served on it for the last, you know, 5 or 6 years, is what I do every day is project management and development. Several cities inside the Boston neighborhoods. And it's very important, especially being so close, to make sure you're managing a fair process, but hearing the neighborhood. I'm big in all the community meetings. That ends up being kind of, you know, my thing at the earlier stages of the project and throughout, just to make sure that you're meeting the city's goals, but you're also hearing the neighborhood, because they're each unique and everybody has, you know, different opinions. So that's one of the biggest things for me, is the hearing from the community and what they want to see, you know, from this board.
Great, thank you very much. So let me just check if any other colleagues have joined us. Okay, so that was our full complement of nominees. Let's go one by one now to see if there's any questions for each person individually. And we'll just go in the same order as before. So for Ms. Hansi Barasa, are there any questions from counselors? Or if counselors would like to make a statement who weren't here before, we'll go in the order of arrival as usual. Counselor Flynn?
We can't hear you, Flynn.
Okay, I apologize. I apologize. I was on mute. I just wanted to ask generally the applicants, how would you balance input from the neighborhood, input from the business community, and elected officials in the media on controversial projects? What would your thinking process be like under those types of controversial projects?
So I forgot to mention that I actually live in Rosendale, and my office is situated on a storefront, Rosendale Village, right across the Boston Public Library in Rosendale. So I have experience with small businesses that support development in terms of their kind of economy and stability. As a resident in Rosendale, I have also experience with community outreach in terms of building my own home in Rosendale. I did not want to leave to the suburbs. Typically, that's what happens when you want to build a home, and so when I started that process, I wanted to introduce the neighborhood that we could build an affordable passive house. And so my relationship with outreach my experience with outreach is really important. I engage the residents first. In terms of being on the other end, there's been very bad development creeping in Rosendale. And so I saw myself on the other end as showing up when there was a project that I thought was not beneficial to the community. And so what was interesting about showing up to the process that exists today in terms of community input is that lots of community members show up at that first meeting, and it was a very grounds up mobilization that occurred in Rosendale where we kind of were fighting against the development. So I see myself having many different hats in terms of understanding the complexities of all the actors. And so my process would be to look at a controversial project from all those different points of views. One from development, I understand that typically a lot of controversial projects deal with greed, I think. But I do think that there are really great developers out there that do have an interest in community, in benefiting the community. So I think that would be my process, like looking at it from the developer's point of view, looking at it from the community point of view, looking at it from the business side of view. And ultimately, I think the decision is going to be rendered in terms of what is majority supported, like who supports this project, also the counselors, having them show up and seeing their kind of support. And if it's a majority support, I know it's a very good project. It went through that process. But ultimately, I really like to think that there's a community benefit with any development. And if you're asking for a variance, the community needs to benefit from that. That would be my process.
Well, thank you very much for the answer. And I was impressed with everybody's opening statement and the background education experience that you had over many years and your dedication to the residents of Boston in so many different ways. So I'm looking forward to voting and supporting you, because I think you all add something that the city needs, and that's a commitment and love to the neighborhoods of Boston. So I'm looking forward to voting in support of this dedicated group right here. Thank you, Councilor Wu.
Thank you, Councilor Flynn. Next up is Councilor Mejia.
Thank you. This is exciting. I get to learn a little bit about you all before I start showing up in the space where you'll be making decisions on behalf of those that I serve. So it's great to have this sort of kind of little quick stop over. So thank you, Councilor Wu, for creating this opportunity to exist. So I'm just a little bit curious. Hansi, I'm really excited that you led with your experiences. I'm just curious que hablaste sobre tus experiencias y quería saber cómo tú vas a trabajar con la comunidad, específicamente la comunidad que hablan en español solamente. ¿Cómo tú vas a usar tu posición para asegurarte que nuestra gente también estén participando y entendiendo el proceso?
Gracias, señora Mejía. Qué bien que supiste que mi primer idioma era español. Para mí eso es algo muy cómodo. Cuando yo veo que hay una comunidad que no está en el proceso, yo le pregunto al counselor, ¿qué proceso tú has hecho con la gente que vive en la comunidad? ¿Cómo ellos saben que tienen que presentar? Usted sabe que la gente latina siempre está, bueno, la mayoría no quiero ser estereotípica, siempre está ocupado, siempre está trabajando y de verdad no hay tiempo para coger un momento, o no hay tiempo a conseguir a alguien que pueda cuidar a los hijos. Entonces yo quiero saber que en el proceso que siempre hay alternativas para esa familia. Y yo creo que el proceso que existe ahora no hay ese proceso de comunicación con la familia hispana de Boston.
Pues muchas gracias por eso, porque
Me sorprendiste.
No, claro, mi primer lenguaje es el español también, y creo que es bien importante hablar en nuestro lenguaje, porque la mayoría de la gente, eso es un privilegio para poder saber, y muchas veces nos hacen sentir mal porque no sabemos hablar inglés. So anyways,
Okay.
I don't know if you guys have a translator up in here, Woo, so you better get it together and get yourself some translation, because I'm not gonna say any of it, and I'm not doing 2 jobs here. You're not gonna pay. No, I'm just joking.
We got you. Some of us are following along.
No, I'm just teasing. Basically, for those who are, Spanish deficit, I'll just let you know real quick. The question was really about how, as someone who is a native, who's a native speaker in Spanish, going to make an extra effort to ensure that Latinos, Spanish-speaking neighborhoods are engaged in the process and also understand how to navigate. There is a privilege, and oftentimes we forget that there are folks who have to go in front of you who don't know how to speak English, and they can bring a translator, but there's nothing like being able to speak in your own native language and be able to advocate for what it is that you're fighting for. And so having that sensibility and also having that cultural competency is really important to me. So I just wanted to show off that I know how to speak 2 languages.
Councilor,
For a chance to show off too.
Councilor Mejia, I love that you said culture competence, because there is a generational, let's say, cultural association with members of the family. And so I have a lot of Latin residents saying, I want my mother to live in the basement. Can you help me? And so I think when those residents show up, you need some form of compassion to understand where they're coming from in terms of the approval process. So thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I'm going to hold you I know you got this, so I'm not worried about you. But I do have one more question, if you don't mind. I don't know, Michelle, how this works, how many, I got one more.
I know, I was trying to kind of go one by one in terms of the nominees, because I know
It's for her.
time constraints.
It's
But
for her. It's fine. I feel like
okay.
she answered. She did an amazing. You already answered 9. You good. Move on to the next, Michelle.
All right, thank you, Councilor
Thank you.
Mejia. I appreciate it. I know everyone has wants to engage with it with all of our nominees here. Councilor Bach, do you have questions for Ms. Barraza?
Thanks so much, Councilor Wu. Thrilled to have you in this process. Really excited. I think we've heard firsthand a lot of the things you bring to the board. So it's really exciting. I think I'm going to ask everybody the same question, which is just, it's kind of a brass taxi thing, but obviously part of the reason that we have alternates for the ZBA is because people are periodically conflicted out. And so it would just be helpful for me, and I'll ask you this question, but I'm going to ask everybody it, just like, what are the things, whether it's types of things or like particular neighborhoods you work in, or the type of work that you do where you would anticipate that you would be conflicted out of ruling on things on the board?
So currently I do have some affordable housing projects on the board in Dorchester and Mattapan. So that's something that I would have to recuse myself. But other than that, I don't really see any conflict of interest. Our office was in the Seaport District for 10 years. I'm familiar with that area. I'm familiar with development. I know many neighborhoods in Boston. I don't really see myself having a conflict of interest other than these affordable housing projects that I have on the board, which are 4 right now. But I would recuse myself.
Great, thanks so much. Madam Chair, I'll just keep my question to that.
Thank you. Councilor Arroyo.
Thank you. I have a question that's basically for everybody, so everybody else can just write it down because it's the same question I would be asking you. As we look at California and the wildfires, and it seems like every month there's a different environmental disaster that is happening due to climate change and global warming. And, I really have a vision for the city where we're a leader on this. How do you see, and what do you see, both your personal role on this board in terms of promoting in housing and in development that is environmentally friendly and advances that cause, and what do you see the board's role as? So basically, what do you see your role as? What is your personal viewpoint on that? How do you think we get there? And what do you see the board's role in that in terms of projects that are in front of them and what they ask and seek? Thank you.
So are all these questions from me or is it to everyone?
Yes. We'll keep going one by one for now.
Oh,
and then
okay.
I'll try to condense and corral as we go on.
Okay, thank you.
So, and if counselors can just be mindful, because I know some of our nominees have to scoot off to other commitments, so we're trying to get them out the door too.
So I think that in terms of preventive measures, I think in terms of sustainability, one has to look into the future and know that the current decision that you make has a long-lasting effect. So I do believe in this kind of long-term development. And in reviewing the projects, one of the things is you have disasters when it deals with density that are not up to code. So I would ensure that that technically the housing are being built to fire standards in terms of the reviews of their drawings. In terms of climate change, so one of the things is density, like what are the open space ratio versus density that you're proposing in development? Is there enough light and air to prevent disasters? The other one deals with environmental, so looking at the ecology. I would have to review long-term planning for the city of Boston in terms of achieving certain goals. So so that would be like my response. So I know that there's concerns with seawater rising near the waterfront edge of the seaport. And so there are ways to deal with that in terms of where the development is putting mechanical systems, what preventive measures is the city putting forward in terms of where development occurs along that water edge. So that's my response.
Thank you. And I'll just have the same question for everybody else so we can save some time there when it's their turn.
Thank you, Arroyo. Appreciate it. Councilor Braden, you're next.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you to all the panelists for your willingness to come forward and participate in the Zoning Board of Appeal. I really appreciate your willingness to serve. I had a question. It's really more the balance between trying to preserve the fabric of a neighborhood in the architectural built environment, and then also incorporating new designs and new buildings. Sometimes that's a conflict. I'd like to hear your thinking about sort of historical architectural preservation versus new development.
I think community preservation is really important and vital to the city of Boston. I was so excited that you passed the Community Preservation Act, and by doing so, you allowed nonprofits access to funding to preserve their buildings, and I was involved in a project that actually benefited from the Community Preservation Act to ensure that this organization, who was residing in Roxbury, for 50 years, would maintain and live in that neighborhood. And so I think preservation is really important from that perspective. And then I would say my experience in terms of working with historic preservation, I think I have a lot of experience. So you can't really build much in Boston without going through some form of historic preservation committee. Almost all our neighborhoods in Boston have some historic neighborhood fabric that needs to be maintained. And so I think that is a very good process to ensure that buildings are not demolished. So you have some of those kind of regulations and processes in place.
Very good. And that's a similar question for all the other panelists, Madam Chair. So that's all my questions for now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councilor Frank Baker. Oh, and I want to note Councilor Sabi George has joined us as well. Councilor Baker, you're next for questions. Oh, actually, Councilor Baker may have stepped away. Okay. So Counselor, let's see if Counselor Sabi George is still here. No, it looks like she has left as well. Okay. So I will just add my quick question, which is around, what are the ways in which you think the board's role can kind of fit into the big picture of development across everything outside the ZBA as well? And what changes might you recommend or be thinking about as you're on this in this seat on the ZBA?
So what role can it play? So my experience with the ZBA is that the projects have been majority kind of vetted out. And then typically there is a recommendation that it requires design review, like leaving the design and aesthetics concerns to the BPDA. I would say this board can take on a much more active role in reviewing and attempting to deal with systematic racist outcomes that our building is part of, that our environment is part of. And so this is a problem that we need to address. And so I think the ZBA board can work with planners, a long-term master planning, a department, to make sure that we are satisfying sustainable measures and to create overlay zoning if we need to begin to bring equity to neighborhoods.
Thank you very much. I want to know, I think Councillor Edwards was on for a bit of time as well. And I know her staff is part of this and monitoring. Okay, so do any other councillors have questions for Hansi? Just feel free to raise a blue Zoom hand if you do. I'm not seeing any. Okay, thank you very much. We appreciate your willingness to serve, and we'll be looking to move these nominations at our next city council meeting. So thank you for being with us. We'll move on to shift the hot seat now to Costa. And again, let me just check who is still available on the councillor side. Okay, Councillor Ed Flynn had to hop off. So Councillor Mejia, you're up first. Councillor Mejia? It looks like she might be away for a bit. Okay, Councillor Bach?
Thanks so much, Madam Chair. Same question, which is just if you could speak to where you might be conflicted and have to recuse yourself. And I'll say, Madam Chair, that I will have to go off after this for a little bit. So I'd be grateful if you would ask that same question to other nominees if I miss them. And I'll definitely be reviewing the tape.
Got it.
Thank you, Councillor. Appreciate it. And obviously relevant, very important and relevant question. I practiced law for almost 20 years. I don't practice anymore. And so with respect to conflicts, I always come to conflicts with two lenses, right? So I served as a special hearing officer for the Board of Bar Overseers. I sit on a corporate board, and I also sit on an academic board of a major academic institution here in Boston. And so aside from the annual proactive reporting with respect to actual conflicts, I look at conflicts, and I always have, both as an attorney and as an advocate, from two lenses. The first being real conflicts, and the second being perceived conflicts. And I think that both of them are equally dangerous. Even though it may not be a legal conflict, it's still a perceived conflict. And so I've never represented clients in zoning matters. I was a transactional lawyer representing mortgage companies and buyers and sellers when they bought and sold their homes. So have never had any active zoning work. However, anything that could potentially, that has ever come in front of me, both as a hearing officer for the state and in other roles that I serve, anything that would be perceived as a conflict as well, I would immediately recuse myself. I think perceived conflicts are just as dangerous as real conflicts.
Thanks so much. I would definitely agree. I think, public confidence and trust in these processes is critical. And so perception is also an important piece piece of the puzzle.
Couldn't agree with you more. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bach. Councillor Arroyo?
I have Councilor Arroyo's question if that's.
Thank you. Yeah, it's
helpful.
the same question for everybody. So if you would just, you really don't have to call me anymore. It's just really what you see your role as personally in terms of environmental protections and development, and what you see the board's role as. Thank you.
Thank you. So with respect to, so first and foremost, when we talk about system dynamics, one of the things that I've studied under John Storman at MIT is climate change simulations and the impact of climate change with respect to development and some of the critical issues that we're faced with. First and foremost, we're not doing enough, and I don't know that we can ever do enough with respect to some of the issues on a very granular level. The reality is that we have a major issue with deforestation. We have a major issue with the depletion of fossil fuels. And the reality is that everything is connected. And I believe that what we do now is we react. We cannot be reactive. We must be proactive. And when so with respect to the actual development, there is a very fine balance, and this sort of overlays slightly with Councillor Flynn's earlier question with respect to the stakeholders. You know, reshaping a potential community as a result of a project that's being proposed needs to be looked at from a multidimensional analysis. And with respect to the impact to the community, both from a sustainability perspective, we have to be very mindful that a single standalone project may look like it's benign, but the reality is the totality of it can be very, very, very impactful to our community and our city as a whole.
Great. Thank you very much.
Councillor Wu, I'm sorry. I was multitasking, so I think you may have missed me. So I just want to make sure that I get to ask.
Yeah, feel free to jump in now. Yeah, I'm sorry. I think you had stepped away for a minute when we were, yeah.
So our options are Greek, French, and Italian.
Okay, well, let me find out. Como talebo. That's it. That's all you get. Okay, Costa, is that okay? Can I call you Costa?
Absolutely.
Okay. I really love the fact that your parents were immigrants. That is really, that's near and dear to me. I was born in the Dominican Republic, so my daughter's first generation. So I hope that she will go much further than I did. And so hopefully you'll build so that she can stay here. But anyways, I do have a few questions for you, and they're very specific to you. So I'm just curious, can you talk to me a little bit about your relationship with the current administration? You know, recently, I'm sure that you heard the story that had come out about the CBA had donated to the Walsh campaign, and your name actually came up. So in your role, I'm just curious, will any of, and I have to ask the question, and I'm sure that you all will say no, but I need to hear it, you know, to ensure that nothing that will come in front of the ZBA will have any political, connection to any of the donations that you have, you know, just want to just be really clear about that. This is not a like gotcha question, you know, I'm just really curious about any conflicts of interest, because these are the sort of things that I see my role as a city councilor to speak on behalf of the people who put me in here. And so oftentimes this is what I hear out in these streets. So I'm bringing it here so that you can talk about it.
Absolutely. Thank you for the question. It's certainly taken in the light that it's been administered in. I believe that it is important to be active with government, and sort of sitting on the sidelines is not excusable. And so you have to be active. I have been active with respect to our local government really for decades, and have supported various administrations, including councilors that are on this call. The reality is, I believe that it's important to be supportive. It's important to have a voice. It's important to support, because the reality is campaigns require contributions to be able to effectively be run. And so, having said that, the specific question was my relationship to the current administration. I've had the opportunity to meet the mayor on several occasions, always in public sort of settings. And have had an opportunity to talk to him about sort of some of the important issues that exist with respect to the city. But it's no different than the relationship that I had with the prior administration. I served on the Landmark Commission, was appointed by Mayor Menino to serve in the 4-Point Channel Commission. And that actually will segue one of the other questions one of your colleagues asked with respect to architectural preservation of communities. But at the end of the day, given my background, and I think that there is, interestingly enough, as you mentioned earlier with the other candidate with respect to some of the cultural things, my word is my bond. And with all due respect, to the question, I will never do anything that in any way, shape, or form would jeopardize the people that would be impacted by a decision. Nobody owns me, nobody controls me. I'm going to be very blunt. I make my own opinions, and and the reality is that sometimes making the right decision is hard, but our job is to do the right thing.
Okay.
And that's the reality. That's who I am.
Okay. Well, see, I like that, because then you got a little bit of street in you, and you're gonna keep it 100%. I love that. Okay.
I was born in Jamaica Plain. I'm not afraid of the streets.
I love this. Okay, good. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you.
My
Michelle.
pleasure, and thank you for the question.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Mejia. Councilor Braden? Let me see if she is still on. I'm sorry, I'm on my phone, so I usually I can see all the screens at once, but I got to scroll through. Okay, it looks like she is no longer on. Okay, so unless Councilors Bach, Arroyo, and Mejia have double round questions for Costa, I will jump in with. Oh.
Wait, I do have a question. It's a clarification. I mean, maybe I was not listening, but I just heard, is it true that Hansi is just coming in as an alternate? She's not like wait, is that true?
Yes. So I just confirmed with the administration, because in the beginning, when Commissioner Irish made that introduction, it wasn't specified. So there are 2 candidates on this call that have been nominated from the Boston Society of Architects. And the way that the process works is that the BSA presents a list of 4 candidates to the administration, and the administration chooses who will be the member and who will be the alternate. In this case, being presented to us are Eric Robinson, nominated as the member, and Hansi Betabarasa, nominated as the alternate.
And who made that? So we don't have nothing to say about that. It is what it is. And
that is the mayor's decision.
Oh. Okay.
Okay. Let's see. So for Costa, if you could just answer the question that would be my question to everyone as well, which is how do you see your role in the ZBA in terms of development across the whole system?
Thank you. I know I don't want to sound like a broken record, because I've talked a little bit about the balance and the importance of looking at projects not just on a granular level, but how they impact the actual community. I think I've touched upon the fact that I'm passionate about the effects of climate change on a macro level, not just on a micro level. But also going back to an earlier sort of framework that was presented by one of your colleagues with respect to residents, small businesses, media, and elected officials. First and foremost, for me personally, I have no problem going on the record and saying that the most important stakeholders are the residents of the community. They're the ones that are directly impacted. There's nothing more sacred than somebody's home. The second thing that I think is really important to point out is the reality that small businesses are struggling to stay alive right now, especially in light of the response to the COVID-19 pandemic. And so, the impact of some of these small businesses that are the lifeblood of not only a community, but potentially a family is really important. I grew up in a family business. My father owned a small business that provided for us. And so I appreciate the impact of small businesses. The elected officials, for myself, I really look at this from the perspective of, the respective councilors. You know your communities better than anybody else. You know your constituents. You talk to them on a regular basis. And that type of feedback is relevant and important. But the reality is that I think that there has to constantly be a balance of all of the various factors that apply to a development. Whether we're talking about climate change and sustainability, whether we're talking about the impact to a neighborhood, whether we're talking about the fact that we have a major crisis in affordable housing, not just obviously, we're talking specifically with respect to Boston, but in general, we're facing a major urban crisis or urban development crisis that is impacting affordable housing. We're seeing young people that actually can't put their roots into a city because it's become unaffordable. All of these components are a multidisciplinary approach to looking at projects and then the impact that they have to our communities. I look at it from the perspective of what good is it to have a large, impressive project when we're actually forcing out, the sort of the fabric of our communities. And so looking at all these from that perspective is important. And finally, the reality is that we have to be very mindful that this is there is a growth component to the way that you tackle development, and the way that you tackle the development of cities and urban planning. And specifically, when you look at it from the perspective of what have we done in the past that's worked, what have we done in the past that has not worked, whether it be prior ZBAs and prior administrations, and the reality in terms of what are we seeing, from the current framework that exists. We have to learn. We have to learn from our mistakes, and we have to learn from our wins, and we have to adapt accordingly.
Thank you very much. Oops, sorry, my video is broken. Okay. There we go. Thank you. Okay, I think unless there are other questions for Costa, we will move on, and appreciate your time as well. So next up is Jean Pinato. Councilor Mejia, could you please kick us off?
Hold on a second. I'm still processing the information you shared with me. Which one is Jean? Oh, wait a minute. Yes. Okay. Oh, I interestingly enough, I know who she is. I know her work. And she's an alternate too. So I don't even understand like how all the women of color we have are alternates. I just don't understand how I ended up in this situation right now. But I'm happy that you even made it this far, Jean.
Thank you. Thank you. Me too.
Let's talk about some progress. I'm just curious. I mentioned in my opening speech the importance of bringing people into these spaces who aren't the same usual suspects. As the former CEO of Madison Park Development Corp, which I do a lot of amazing work with. They are always one of our biggest thought partners when it comes to dealing with anything in the community. I'm just curious, how do you see your role on the ZBA as an opportunity to bring those people into the table that have never, previously been a part of it? And, I almost kind of feel it's unfair to ask these questions, Michelle, Councilor Wu. And while I do appreciate the process and I understand that everything goes through different forms, but the fact that the women that I'm interviewing, even if their role is just alternate, it just feels to me that the system is still broken and it's not working for my taste. So I just want to put that out in the record in case, so if everybody wants to replay it, I'll say it again. The system is not working for me. I feel like 2 women of color who I'm interviewing right now are being presented to me as options, but as options as alternates. And that speaks volumes to what our little Black and brown girls are thinking about as who really is sit here to represent them. So that's another bandwagon, and I'm not gonna get on my political soapbox around that, but Jean, if you don't mind answering me, how in your alternate role, how would you be able to, at the very least, ensure that our voices are being heard?
Yeah, thank you very much for the question. So I really do believe in a participatory planning process. I think that's an important part of evaluating these projects. I don't want to see projects that developers have conceived of and then presented to the community. They're better projects if they engage with the community from day one. And that's what we did at Madison Park. And I think that you've got to listen to all the voices in the community. So we worked hard to bring homeowners, renters, a variety of people into these meetings. I think one of the positive things about COVID is that these online forums really present opportunities for more people to be engaged in the process and more voices to be heard. So we went out of our way to get the low-income residents who wouldn't normally show up at a public meeting to come downtown and go to a ZBA hearing and be part of the process. And I want to see more of that as a member of the ZBA. I'd like to see more of that happening. I think that that the board can do a lot. Sort of to answer Councilor Wu's question, we see a lot, and we'll have a unique vantage point of what's happening in the city. And I think when we look at racial segregation in the city, it's really our role to help dismantle that. And it's that way by design. It was, designed that way. Policies, created the racial segregation, and we're continuing that in the city. You look at the whole South Boston Seaport, all right, a brand new part of our city. What did we do? We perpetuated racial segregation in this city. And shame on us, right? We ought to be thinking more progressively in the city about how we design neighborhoods, who's included, whose voices are involved. So I have a little bit of like, I want to see us take more of a role in the planning process, in a policy, making, we don't make policy, but we can sit down with you and think about policies. Cambridge, the city of Cambridge has a very interesting policy. They're putting forth an affordable housing overlay kind of zoning, which would allow affordable housing to be created much easier without going through a whole lot of variances and other kinds of permitting processes that hold it up for years. So there are ways to do more about making the city more fair and equitable, and communities, places that are open to all of Boston's residents. I think on the, if I can just sort of talk a little bit about sustainability and environmental justice, I think that we spent a lot of time on climate change, but what's really going to impact the city and residents, particularly people of color, is heat. Heat is a way more bigger influence on people's lives. And so these heat waves and people's ability to deal with heat has a broad impact on the city. I think there isn't enough talk about that because those are impacting low-income communities more than they're impacting the rest of the city. And so I see my role as someone who's a fair judge of what's coming before us. I want to see that community engagement. I want to see that elected officials and community leaders are supporting projects in their neighborhoods, and that we don't just weigh the whims and the desires of developers to propose what they think is best for our neighborhoods. I'm a big proponent of affordable housing, but I believe in really good architecture. I'm proud of all the buildings that Madison Park has developed. Many of the buildings in our neighborhood, many of the projects we did added, over 10 buildings to the National Register of Historic Places. So we were sensitive about if we were renovating a building and it was historic in nature, that we took advantage of historic tax credits and use those resources to both make the project better and to and to finance and preserve affordable housing. And the issue of preservation, I think that's really, really critical. We can lose more affordable housing in the city than we can build very easily by not paying attention to preservation and letting projects go to market. And so I think that's also really an important part. I want to see projects come before us that are helping to preserve these buildings so that they're affordable to our folks and using the public resources available to do that. I tried to answer multiple questions in that.
Thank you. You're good, Councilor Mejia?
Well, she took your answers too.
Yeah. Well, I got a new question now. Actually, I'm going to jump in and I just want to, I'm sorry, I'm frozen on video, poor internet. For Commissioner Irish, could we just clarify, because there's lots of, we're talking about creating a whole board here, even though we're speaking to folks one by one. So Commissioner, if you could just verify if my numbers are right, as I've been going through these lists. Currently, there are 7 people confirmed, including 4 members and 3 alternates. Of the 4 members, 1 is a person of color. Of the 3 alternates, 1 is a person of color. So before us today are 4 new nominees and 1 reappointment. So of the 4 nominees, 2 are for members, 2 are for alternates. And the 2 that are alternates are people of color. So eventually, if we approve everyone here today, we're going to be looking at 11 people seated, 6 members, 1 of whom will be a person of color, and 5 alternates, 3 of whom will be people of color. Is that correct?
No, that is not gonna, I'm not.
Is that correct, Commissioner?
Yeah, I believe that's correct. And, thanks for your question. I also want to just add to the conversation that the mayor shares your commitment to diversity. I'm proud to be a part of probably the most diverse administration that we've ever had. Judging with the candidates that we've put forward, there's a continued commitment to diversity, and I just want to be very clear that that with the alternates on this board are engaged very often. So this is not a board where the alternates don't really get an opportunity to have their voices heard. They're going to be called on frequently, given the busy schedule that the Board of Appeals has.
So could I ask a question, Councilor Wu? Is that out of turn?
No, go ahead.
Okay, so Commissioner Irish, and you and I went to high school together, so I'm never gonna come for you like I come for everybody else, but I am curious though. How are you gonna decide when you call upon on these alternates? And is there a system in place is it because a few people can't show up and then the alternates are there? Is it because there's gonna be, a conflict of interest and then they serve? Like, are these folks gonna be, no, so I think we need to reevaluate at what point alternates are coming in. I'm just curious about what the process is. And I'm new, I've only been in this office for 8 months. So forgive me if I don't know the process, but I'm very curious about, if we only have a very little representation to begin with, I need to make sure that there's gonna be a concerted effort to ensure that diverse voices and perspectives are in these spaces when it's time to speak upon issues that are impacting communities who have traditionally been unheard by the system. So can you just help me understand what the process is for these alternates?
Yeah, no, sure. And since you brought it up, I have to say go Bears. And by the way, even though I don't speak Spanish, I am able to read, write, and understand very well listening. So I got to work on the speaking part, but thank you for that. So you touched on the art of scheduling. It is a variety of factors. It's, there are cases where we have members who need to recuse themselves. We have members who are on vacation. We have, different scheduled things come up that, so we're always communicating with board members to try to put schedules together and find out who's available. And quite often, folks are very busy. As you can see from these individuals, they're very talented and busy people as well. So they're not always available to meet our schedule. We have more hearings now than we've had in the past. We have a Thursday evening session for subcommittee projects as well. So given the schedule and given people's conflicts and availability, it often leads to alternates having to sit so that we can have 7. Now, there are cases now, there's because of the numbers of people that we have in availability, where we have just the minimum at 5 sitting or sometimes 6. So I think we're going to more often have 7 people available now, should these candidates be approved. And I also want to mention that I know specifically with Jean that the mayor would have loved to put her into a full-time position initially, but we also have different seats that are available, and the seat that was available that made a good fit was an alternate position based on she would fit into an at-large position. And the at-large position currently as a full-time member is already taken up by a wonderful chairwoman.
Councilor Wu, I don't see any of them other.
Yeah, so I just want to clarify. So Commissioner, and just to be real clear about this, there are also still 3 other seats that are open that we have not received any nominations from the mayor about. If all 3 end up being people of color who are nominated, we will still only have 2 out of 7 members, people of color, and then 5 out of 7 alternates, people of color. It's just a very, very clear disparity there. So I just want to note that, because I know there's lots of names in the mix, and sometimes it's hard to see the whole system and what it's adding up to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I have one more question, and Councilor Wu and or Commissioner, since you both know this better than I do, but I'm just curious, if there's open seats, then I don't understand, why can't we just give them to the people who are alternates? What's the reason why these 2 women can not just be part of the board right now, and then the other ones that we're still trying to figure out let them be the alternates. Like, what's up with, why can't we just do that? And maybe there's legal reasons why, and there's all these other, but I'm saying, like, if I'm sitting here listening to these women and I'm really excited about their philosophy and their ability to be community centered and their whole approach to this work, and if people out in these streets have been screaming that they don't feel heard, and now we have an opportunity to rectify that situation, then I don't understand why we're not moving in that direction. Can one of you help me understand why these two women of color are going to serve as alternates when there's still spaces that need to be filled? Why don't just give them the full on job titles? Like, what's up?
Yeah, so the one seat that's open, there's only, after this crop of nominees are acted upon, there would only be one additional open seat. And that seat is the one that's for the mayor to choose on his own. It's not one of the ones through the architects or the building trades or, you know, these other pathways, but it is someone that has to have served for a year on a neighborhood association. So I don't know if, Jean, do you have that kind of experience or?
Yeah, no, I don't sit on any formal neighborhood association, which I think is the criteria for that seat.
Yeah.
Okay. What about you, Hansley? What's your problem?
I'm involved in an informal neighborhood organization. It's called the Woodboard Neighborhood Association. I guess it is.
So if it's legit, all right.
I think it is a legit. I mean, that's why, as I mentioned, we all came together and activate the association again, because we saw so much bad development coming into the neighborhood. But yes, I am part of the Woodbourne Neighborhood Association.
So do you meet every other criteria? If that's the case, Commissioner Irish, and if this is true, she's here in a public hearing, so she's not going to lie about it. If she is a part and legitimately a candidate that would qualify under the law as written, then I would like to move into advocating. Whether or not I can advocate for this or not doesn't really matter, because I'm going to say it anyways, is that I would like to advocate that at least Hansley becomes an official ZBA member, not an alternate. At least I would advocate for that. And that's just me and my own little humble opinion. And I think that this whole system needs to, it just does not work for the people, period. This whole little interaction right here and what I have learned in this short period of time is why so many people are disengaged from the process, because it is supposed to be confusing so that nobody can understand it.
So let's follow up. I'll work as committee chair. I'll work offline with the administration to explore some options. And I think this is really important that this is, that we're looking at this again, systemically and not just person by person. I want to emphasize person by person. All of you are amazing and qualified. And I've heard from all of the nominating organizations about how hard you work and how rooted you are in community. So again, we're doing it a little differently right now in the city council. Normally it is strictly by individual qualifications and motivations, in which case all of you would immediately be on the board. But we're in a moment where this really matters for multiple reasons across the city. And so we want to think of it as big picture here. Okay, so let's move on. I want to see if Councillor, is Councillor Braden? Okay, I think Councillor Braden hopped off. All right, so any more questions for Jean?
I know Councillor Sabi George is here. I don't know. If
sorry, I'm on my phone. I can't see anyone here.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, Councillor Sabi George. We are on Jean Canado right now. Did you have any questions for her?
I was in, out, now I'm back. I don't have any specific questions. And I know most of those that are here before us, and I'll make sure to introduce myself to the others at another point. But just thank you everyone for being here. And I would like to thank all of the applicants for their interest in service. It is one of the greatest gifts that you can give to the city that you call home. So I appreciate that. And if I have specific questions for each of them, I will reach out independently, just because I have skipped in and skipped out, want to be mindful of everyone's time and don't want to be rude. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much.
And
okay.
I would just address the conflict issue in case someone's reviewing the
Oh
tape.
my goodness, that is my job. Yes, so conflict and quickly
And so
employment.
I am still an employee of Madison Park Development, very part-time consultant role. So I would recuse myself from anything that came before the board from Madison Park Development Corporation or any of our key partners in any of our developments. And I don't know what the next chapter looks like. Hasn't exactly been the gap year I hoped, but I certainly will recuse myself if there's any actual or even perceived conflict.
Thank you very much. Okay, thank you, Ms. Panado. We'll move on to Eric Robinson. Councilor Mejia.
Oh, okay. And I would have to say that I agree with Councilor Wu. I'm really excited about you all. So just because we had a little moment of trying to figure it out doesn't necessarily mean or minimize how fabulous you all are. Okay, I just want to be really clear. It has nothing to do with you. It's just the whole entire process is a little bit frustrating. Eric.
Yes.
The same questions that I had for Acosta is
Yes.
the same question that I have for you.
Yes.
Your name was another one that came up in the article about the ZBA nominees donating to the current administration's campaign.
Yes.
And how can we be assured that your role in the ZBA will not be impacted by this? And then also, I'd like to hear from you, how would you like to see the process of the CBA be more transparent for applicants and community members? And then I also want to address a little bit around cultural competency. I'm just curious about how you look at this work through a cultural competency lens and really being able to understand the needs of diverse constituents. And when you
Okay. Thank you. I'll try to hit those very quickly. I think not to sort of echo Costa's, but I'm in the same position. I do believe being active is important, and the process is set up. And I think that donations are part of that process. If you believe in an elected official and what they believe in, I think that is the process for moving forward. That was years ago, I believe. I haven't donated to, I don't believe any of the elected officials in the last handful of years. And it was really, as I mentioned, this process in terms of being introduced to the ZBA as a potential seat was about 2 years ago when I spoke with the then architect on the ZBA, Anthony Pisani, who served for 35 years on the board. And he asked me in a very sort of informal conversation, have you ever thought about sitting on the board? And I had never thought of it. I had been in front of the board many times. And so, I think the discussion started there with the understanding of this notion of what's the balance between serving the communities that you're working in and my clients and also what the perspective is as you represent myself as a business owner within the communities that I'm working in. So that balance, I think, made I sort of thought a lot about those things. And, since then I've sort of stepped away from that part of more of the elected side of the world, I would say. And, my focus right now is on my business, my family, and ultimately this seat. And I think it's ultimately very critical. And I think the issue associated with the zoning board, I think, is extremely important. And hopefully I'm not going to sort of talk out of turn, but because having been to the zoning board and been through the community process in this city, in every neighborhood in the city, with my work, I really do see a lot of the shortfalls associated with the process. And I'm going to sort of talk a little bit to Councilor Wu's question in the broader concept of, I do think there are problems with the system from start to finish. The ZBA is really at the finish line. It is the last moment of a project's life, either yes or no. And it's hyper focused that is the process, or that is represents the project, which is, I believe, and again, as an architect in the city, is false. The previous 2 years, 1 year in the community and working on the process is really what makes the merits of the project. They just come to a public forum in the term of the ZBA at that moment for a vote. And so I do believe there's problems in the entire system. The Zoning Board of Appeals hearing, the majority of the projects at the Zoning Board of Appeals hearing are small, single family, triple family, someone wanting to add an in-law, so very sort of small in terms of their larger capacity in terms of the projects, but super critical to the individual homeowner or resident of that particular project or the proponent of that project. And I think the system is not set up properly because the process is the exact same for the person who wants to do an in-law apartment in their single family unit or 2-family unit as a 200 unit project in the city. Yes, there's more planning associated with the BPDA and all the things that go with it, but the system is basically set up the same way. So I really appreciate what the ZBA has done in terms of creating the Thursday evening hearings that I think are more consistent with smaller scale projects and the projects associated with the real constituents in the city who are trying to push forward an important project for them. And it might have zero or little impact on the broader community because it's really associated with. So I think what we see is a lot of the smaller projects have to go through this very complicated process, which is not fair to the small projects. And I totally agree with that. And I believe there should be change in how that works. Now, again, as a ZBA member, I would be happy to be involved in some policy changes and recommendations how I believe that could happen. But ultimately, I think as a sitting person on the ZBA, you're having to sort of take all of the experiences that we've talked about today. And you know, Jean talked about an amazing community design process. I totally agree with her on that. And most of our projects start in the community with nothing drawn yet. We go to community groups or we go to the abutters and we talk about what can they see there? Can they see this kind of project there? Can they not see this kind of project? What do they want to do? We've done multiple outreach programs on our project. So we take a community-based process in the projects that we do. So I think there is a process that works, but it is based on how do you get support of the community that you're designing and building in? And I think that's the system does need to be altered and changed to be more responsive and more reflective of that process. And then in terms of the ethics aspect of it, I think that, you know, I understand the lines of ethical responsibility as it relates to the seat and the board seat and my role as an architect in the city. I believe that there is going to be some issues in that case, just from the standpoint, because I am working in the city as a designer and an architect, but I also fully understand where those lines are and where they need to be drawn, and will recuse myself when it makes sense for the project or for the community that the project is in. So I've done a lot of thinking about that over the last 2 years. And the year and a half since I was nominated back in March of 2019 from the BSA for the first time. And I fully have vetted that and understand that. And I'm ready to commit to making sure that those are not the issues. With respect to the environment, I mean, all of our projects are working within the city and are all the different neighborhoods. Environmental concerns are something that I believe in. And I was trained as an architect in environmental design and architecture in my undergraduate years. It's been something that has been consistent through my work throughout my career. So currently we are actually working on 3 or 4 projects that are passive house solar or passive house criteria, which is much higher than LEED in terms of its sustainable principles in design and architecture. And it's really a matter of how we think and work on our projects. Working within the city, there are other issues associated with floodplains, flooding, all the different aspects of it. That is something that we are acutely aware of, and we are working on majority of our projects, implementing true sustainable practices, whether it be raising up mechanical systems above floodplain, whether it's raising the whole building. So there's design criteria that can help us manage our way through that process. But those are things that really need to be addressed prior to the Zoning Board of Appeals, because the Zoning Board of Appeals is weighing in on the decision. If those criteria are met, yes, I appreciate that and I agree with that. But I think we need to do better as an approvals process in the city to ensure that projects are using these better principles in terms of design and sustainability as they go through their process prior to the ZBA, because I think the ZBA really needs to be a body to listen to the community input and understand the project in a fairly quick manner. The majority of the hearings are fairly quickly done, and so the information comes in, in the matter of minutes. And I think there needs to be quick assessment and understanding of, are the elected officials on board with the project? They've been part of that earlier process. Have the mayor's office been in part? Has the community members been in part? And so when they all come together, it's about understanding and appreciating the process up to that point. So I think there's a goal to ensure that the projects have gone through a process, but I think the process needs work before it gets to the ZBA. I know you had another question. I want to make sure I got it. Sorry, I wrote down. And then Councilor Braden asked about the fabric of the city. And I think one of the things that we work extremely hard on, because majority of our projects are in the communities, in the neighborhoods. We're not working in the seaport. We're not working downtown. We are working in JP. We're working on Washington Street. We're working on Freeman Street. And so we need to make sure that whatever our projects are and whatever the context of the neighborhood they're in, are consistent with the community that we're building. So scale, design, respect for the community that it's within. Did I get all the questions, or?
Y tú hablas español también. No, just-
Ich sprechen Sie Deutsch. My mom came over in '77 from Germany, so I'm first generation as well. So, but not in your background, but in Germany. So
I feel like I'm going to do a DNA test on everybody here.
Nope.
No, thank you. I appreciate that, Eric. I really do.
And I think, with respect to the justice and the perspective of, that's a complicated question for me to ask, or me to answer. We, as myself, as a human, I strive every day for equality and anything I can do. My office is 27 people, 16 are females, which I'm super proud of. We have had some luck, I'll be honest, not great, with hiring minorities in the design field. Is extremely hard to do. There is just not that many minorities in the design field. That is a much larger issue as well. And so in order for us to get our name out, and we volunteer and we do a lot of work with community organizations that do represent minorities. We help Youth Build, who is a high school outreach program for minority students, and we participate in programs with them to bring them to our job sites. We'll do anything we can to try to bring more minority designers into the field. It's hard to do it. We have had 3 or 4 minority designers over the time, which is not good. It's not good enough. I appreciate that as a business owner, and we are trying to do better, but it's something that we continue to work on. And I'll say it's a struggle, and we appreciate that. And with respect to me as the main seat on the board or the alternate, I would love to have Hansi on the board. I mean, I know her firm, I know her work, and I would rather have 2 architects on the board all the time. It's a very complex situation to be in, to listen to the scenarios that are being put forth, and then think about all the technical criteria associated with a hearing. So, I mean, if I could advocate, I would love to have 2 architects on the board at all time, because I think it's a really strong and important position to understand the context of where these projects are being proposed in. And there's absolutely a myriad of other issues that we all understand, but I think ultimately we are building buildings, or we're trying to build buildings that shape our city and shape the communities that we build in. And I think, again, as an architect and a leader designer, I think it's my responsibility to lead that process and not propose projects that are not supported by the community or not going to benefit the community. And I think that's something that the city also needs to work on, is holding the design family or the design industry to a higher level of doing better, and not just listening to what the clients are saying, or jam this much down. That is not the right way to shape our cities. And I believe that as a designer and an architect. And I think that's something that I will bring to the board, because I think that we propose and go through a process that is much more respectful of the community process and the folks that it'll impact. And so, you know, I don't know, sorry.
Don't apologize for your passion, Eric.
I understand the complexity of this situation, and, you know, and I feel like, you know, I'll be honest, over the last year and a half, I've wondered and back and forward for all these reasons. And I think I just keep going back to the same reason, that I can't not try to be involved, because I think if I can get involved, I can actually make change as an architect and a designer and somebody with some real experience working in this city on the streets of the neighborhoods.
So I'm going to say one thing before Michelle Wu takes
Yep.
away from me.
Sorry.
And just response really quick is that I believe, and I'm just an optimist, I believe that everything and anything is possible. And you have an amazing opportunity, and I would say responsibility, to also think about the next generation of architects, right, in the city of Boston. So if you have to build that bench yourself and create a seat that at that table for young, emerging Black and brown and other children of color or low income to come into your office and do an internship and expose them, because we don't know what we don't know. Like I used to clean offices and sell shoes when I was a kid, right? I never knew about any of these careers, right? And so I think that you all as professionals have an opportunity and a responsibility to create space for the younger generation to come in and see you at work, to see what it looks like, because a lot of our kids are geniuses, they just don't know it. And so if you're serious about that, then you can create a program. And I know this public hearing is not about that, so I'm not gonna go too much into it, but there's some things that we could all do to really start thinking about how do we address this? Because there is something that everyone could do here. There's no way that I can really believe that it's impossible to have, and then I hear that everywhere. It's impossible to get Black and brown people. Like, there's a will, there's a way, and I will work with you on figuring out what that looks like. I'm the chair of small business and workforce development. So I have a vested interest in helping you succeed to ensure that we have more representation in your industry. So I'll volunteer to help you with that.
And I will take your help, because it's something that we honestly do care. We do have a paid internship from a Cristo Rey student before COVID. He's been in our office for the spring, and we're hoping when we get back to the office.
I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I know we're running long on time, so we're not here to investigate your personal life and all this. So Councilor Mejia, do you have any other questions, or Councilor Salvi George, do you have questions for Eric?
No.
Good. Okay. And again, I know especially Mr. Robinson here, you have been in this process for a long time. You were nominated long ago, I think shortly after or just around the time that the news had come out that had put the ZBA in the spotlight a while ago. And so your nomination has been on hold. Again, not anything because of your background or what we didn't even really get into the individuals, simply because the system itself was under investigation, multiple investigations.
That doesn't bother me.
Level. So I want to
thank you for that.
But I know you've been part of that, and you've been trying to be part of the board for a long time. So thank you very much. And then last but not least, we will go to Carrie Logue. I know, Carrie, I don't know if you had written down the previous questions, but there was a question about what would likely be conflicts of interest, what would be kind of your philosophy around climate and how the ZBA's responsibility fit into that, around development as a whole. And then I'm sure Councilor Mejia will jump into with questions for you.
Sure. So on the conflict of interest one, so I think similar to what Eric was just saying, my company does a lot of work in Boston, the Cambridge area, which obviously isn't relevant to this board. But for any type of project like that, I would know in advance if it was coming up and going before the board. So just recuse myself. In the time that I've been sitting on the board, it hasn't happened, to me yet. So, but aware of that, and I agree with Costa also about perceived conflicts. There's just can't be too careful, and we want to make sure we have a clean and fair process coming from all angles. So that would be the conflict piece. Environmental matters, personal role, and what's the board's role. So again, what I do at work, so if we say personally, which is professionally, same thing, but off the board, the beginning of the project, we would make sure we have the right consultants on board, some of which would be through the design team, some of which would be through the owner who we would represent. But that's anything from your air quality, your storm drainage, utility efficiencies, impacts on the neighborhood, things like that. So we would, myself as a project manager, would make sure we have all those appropriate consultants aligned and on the project and carrying out their oversight from start to finish. And then for the zoning board, I would say similarly, we're kind of looking for all of that work to have been done by the time you get to the end of the finish line there. And we gather that information and, make sure it's been done right and kind of move on from there. The balance of preserving the neighborhood character and incorporating the new design into the neighborhood. So professionally and, on my personal projects, I said this earlier, done a few large projects in the city and, I've done a lot of community outreach. And part of that is you have to go into the neighborhood. I mean, I live in South Boston, but that doesn't mean I know everything about every neighborhood, compared to the residents that live there and how it's going to impact them. So a lot of work needs to be done up front, get a feel for the neighborhood. What is the culture? What is the character? What's the community? What are the things that they feel that they're lacking or would like to see? And I forget if it was Eric or Costa that mentioned this, but the plans, we see it in zoning hearings a lot. Not a lot, I should say, in comparison to the amount of cases we see, but you might hear oh, we didn't have as many meetings, or there's times where you might see a large group of people that it's very clear that another check-in has to happen, just to make sure designs change. Again, architects are aware of how much that can change. You can get lost in that, but you need to make sure that the neighbors are included. And sometimes it's just a matter of knowing that they have a liaison and a person that's working on that project, that's hearing their questions. You can't solve everything, but you can certainly hear them and do your best to, make all parties happy. And then what are the ways you think the board can have a greater role in the overall development within the city? I think, Michelle, that was the last one. And again, I think just hearing it from all perspectives, whether it be the applicant, you'll hear, someone said it earlier, I have my family member that's moving in and this is, we need to make these changes to an existing condition, or you're a neighbor who you may be impacted by the view or it's parking or the way they're maintaining the property and interacting with the other neighbors. We have to look at it from that view, of course, in conjunction with the zoning and making sure that we're carrying out the job that we're all here volunteering to do, or being appointed to do, excuse me. So that's a greater role in the overall development. Did I miss one?
Thank you very much. No, I think that's good, Councilor Mejia.
Hold on one quick second. I don't think, you are, no questions from you. How lucky are you? You survived. No, thank you for your service and we really do appreciate you. And I don't have any questions for you. Thank you.
Thank you for the continued consideration. It's great to be involved and happy to continue doing it if that's the direction it goes.
Thank you. Councilor Sabi George.
I don't have any questions. Thank you, Carrie.
Thanks.
Okay, I think that is everyone. I want to thank everyone again. Commissioner Irish, did you want to add anything as that would be relevant for councilors as we are considering next steps?
Thank you for holding this hearing, and thank you for everyone's participation and interest in serving in this capacity. The only thing I'd like to just reiterate is that all board members will be official members. So I just want to make sure that that's loud and clear, that I don't consider alternates to not be official. Everyone's official, and I really thank the council for your time today. That's it for me.
Thank you. So just to clarify that on one point, because I know this will be something that the council is weighing. All board members, alternates are members, but just to reiterate from before, when matters are before the board, it is the members who take the vote, and the only way that alternates are voting is one, unless there's not a full 7 members present at that meeting, and then 2, unless that sort of member for that same seat that the alternate represents is conflicted out. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So for example, and then Commissioner, could you just clarify, this might be getting really into the weeds, but let's say there are 6 members seated and 3 alternates. Which of the 3 alternates steps in to that meeting to become the member then? How do you decide which of the alternates?
It would depend on what vacancy we're trying to fill. So
right now there's an open member seat for the at-large neighborhood position, but there's no at-large neighborhood alternate seated either. So in that case, which of the other seats kind of gets priority to become the vote in that situation?
So, I mean, currently, because we're so short, I mean, we have no architects. So, you know, do we need an architect? Who's not available for that meeting? So, I mean, it's really more of an art than a science in terms of filling the vacancies. And sometimes it just comes down to, you know, in the time that I've been commissioner of ISD, it's been who's available just so we can try to get 7.
Okay, and one last question, because I think this is one point that has been publicly described as in some way, and I'm just going to push back openly on this, that the council has been holding back cases and causing a delay when in fact it was that their ZBA meetings canceled because of COVID that have caused a backlog. There are currently 7 members seated. That is, as I've traced back the sort of lineage of each seat, that is not an abnormal number of seats that has been the total during the course of this administration. Is that correct? That even at one point during the administration, there were only 6 people seated, and frequently there's been 7 or 8, but 7 is not an abnormally low number.
So I could look into that, but be honest, I've been in this position since June last year, so I can only speak to that time right now. But I'm happy to look further back historically to answer that question. With respect to the first part of the question, I think we've been very clear that the significant backlog that we have was due to COVID. We are trying to eliminate the backlog. And so it is fair to say that not having, more members available to us, it does create a challenge when we try to schedule cases, and it has led to some deferrals and some cases being pushed back. But I think that's something that we're all collectively working on. So, but I agree, this issue that we're all trying to solve was largely created due to COVID-19.
Thank you. And I only raise that because I know that the counselors in making this decision have been feeling some pressure, because we very much want to see businesses and residents not face extra delay. And so when there is a narrative created that it's because of the counselors not taking a vote, that takes away from our ability to make our decisions in a thoughtful, considerate way. So I just want to be very clear that we are doing this, and it is not directly related or causing some of the COVID impacts. And then the other thing, I just really want to clarify, and I'm happy to share the data if anyone's interested. I've traced these seats back to 2012. We've regularly had 7 or 8 members. And so this, again, the number that we have now is not fewer than usually we have. At one point between 2012 and now, there were up to 10 members, but it's fluctuated constantly. And we've had 4 sudden resignations from the board within the last year. And that's why the council has had to approve these. And so I just want to be very clear about what, where we are, and that we are going through a process that is deliberate, that is thoughtful, and it looks at the bigger systemic picture. And so again, really grateful for all of you for being willing to be part of this. We fully back the board and its efforts, and want to make sure that we're just doing everything we can in this moment for the city to respond to the crises that are before us. So thank you all. I'll go to, in case any of my colleagues want to offer a final closing statement, Councillor Mejia or Councillor Sabi George. I think we've used enough of your time. Councillor Mejia?
No, I'm really grateful for this learning opportunity to be here and see how the process works. And just really grateful for everyone in their time and their passion and their desire to really want to serve in this capacity. And know that regardless of whether or not you might think I am a little bit radical, that I am here for all of it. And I feel like we need to push when things don't feel right. And that is what people put us in office to do. And I'm here for all of that pushing. But I know that it's a push and pull, and everyone has to lean in. And so, again, just grateful for everything that I've learned. And I know Neil Doherty, you're listening in, so you could just signal to, he's a governmental liaison to the mayor, just let him know that I'm not, that I do have some reservations about the fact that the 2 women of color are serving as alternates. And I do appreciate, Commissioner Irish, your sentiments that they are a valued voice, but at the end of the day, the bottom line is that if you're not a legit voting member when it really matters, then it's great to have your name on the piece of paper, but it just feels a little bit transactional. And we need to come back to Hansi and see, at the very least, if that little empty seat that we have, I'm a push for her to take it. And that's where I'm standing. And you could just let everybody know that that's what I'm fighting for, period.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Sabi George.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And again, thank you everyone for being here today and sharing sort of a slice of your story and a little bit of your history and resume, CV with all of us. I think that it speaks volumes to have such highly qualified and highly regarded individuals who are interested in a capacity to serve here in the city of Boston, and in a role that is not an easy one for sure. And as difficult as it is to be an elected official and deal with sort of the politics of government in the way that we do as elected officials, I think the ZBA's got even more sort of special twist to it, and sort of the pressures and the pressure points that you would be dealing with in that capacity. So I'm grateful for your desire to serve, and grateful for your interest in the future of the city, and being a part of building that future, and building the city for the future. So I'm grateful for your interest, grateful for your desire, and look forward to moving ahead with the next steps that we have at the council level. So thank you all for being here. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Again, thank you, everyone. This will conclude our committee meeting in the Planning, Development, and Transportation Committee, and we will follow up with this by our next City Council meeting on Wednesday. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
You have to gavel.
Thank you.
Gavel.
I'm in the car.
Gavel us before it's not legit. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I would really love your help, and no matter where this goes.
Yeah, no, we're gonna find a way to connect us, and I'm gonna
I
send.
can find you. I know where you are.
Okay, well, send me an email.
I will. I'll
put
send you one.
I'm gonna put you to work.
Please. I want to go to work. I work a lot, but I want to work more. Don't worry.
Oh, I'm a workaholic. Watch, you'll see. Send me an email. Bye.
Thank
Have a
you
good
for your
weekend, all.
comments.
Okay,
Bye.
thank you.